Welcome to the NARUC Power Walk. I'm Regina Davis. For this episode, I'm chatting with Jonathan Knauer, Vice President of Policy and Market Strategy at ConnectDER. So Jonathan won NARUC's Shark Tank competition last year, and as the winner, he has the opportunity to walk us through the innovation that so impressed our Shark Tank judges, provide some practical context surrounding this technology, and of course, expound on why this really matters for regulators. Now, just as a disclaimer, NARUC does not make any product endorsements. However, we do value the opportunity to have dialogue such as this to inform our members and the broader regulatory community. So welcome, Jonathan. I'm glad that you're here to chat with us.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. Good morning. I'm happy to chat. Looking forward to it.
What did you think of your Shark Tank experience, and would you do it again?
Well, I was very happy to have won, and yeah, I would feel much better about it the second time around. It definitely was a little unnerving to get up there on the stage, but once I was up there and in front of everyone and into a rhythm, it felt great. It was just a little hard to get up there, but yeah, once I got going, everything was wonderful. What we do, ConnectDER, is we manufacture meter socket adapters, and a meter socket adapter is a device that sits between a residential customer's electric meter and their meter socket. Generally, the meter socket is owned by the customer, the adapter is owned by the customer, and then the meter is owned by the utility.
Right.
And because we are in that gray area between customer ownership and utility ownership, we're sitting right at that interface. We do need to ensure that we have utility permission to install our devices. And what we have found is that in a lot of cases, utilities are much more comfortable adopting this type of technology when they have regulatory sign-off to do so. Generally, the meter socket is owned by the customer. The adapter is owned by the customer. So my role at the company for the past several years has really focused on working with with utilities, with regulators, in some case, state legislatures and other state agencies, to bring about the change that is required for these products to be adopted and for customers to benefit from them.
Okay, that's a good overview. So
Yeah.
now that sets the stage for us to jump right into these questions. And my first question, of course, talks about the impact of DER's distributed energy resources overall. We know that that includes smart home appliances, solar storage systems, and EVs as examples. And so these are, of course, coming online at increasing rates, and even our own NARUC research has shown that from 2023 to 2027, that the total U.S. market for these DERs are expected to double. So
Mm-hmm.
the impact of these resources on the electricity system will be determined, of course, in part by decisions of state policymakers. Now, as we all know, that's a lot of load growth going on. And you have
Mm-hmm.
pointed out that it's not just the one-way street that we saw for much of the 20th century. So I want you to talk about that and walk us through this increasing household adoption of DERs and how that really affects the grid today.
Sure. So, I mean, I I do want to just be clear from the outset that, like, we are talking about residential DERs here. There you could look at an example like Texas, where the ERCOT region is benefiting massively in terms of their resource diversity because of the influx of utility scale wind and solar and storage. That's working out very, very well in Texas. But we're really on the other end of the spectrum. We're looking at residential distributed energy resources, and at ConnectDER, what we really think about primarily in terms of the end use applications is solar, batteries, and electric vehicles, which is kind of another way of saying batteries. Ultimately, there's more that we want to be able to do with EVs than just charging them. So residential solar is definitely distributed energy, but is it a resource? Um, it's a resource to the homeowner. I think that's pretty clear. Is it really a resource to a utility? It rooftops residential solar, it plays a somewhat marginal role in reducing demand at times of the day that are less than optimal. Um, Due to the way that it's metered, it's largely invisible to utilities, and it can't be called upon in times of need.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of opportunity for um, improvement in residential solar. There are 4 million homes that have it currently. Um, Less than 10% of those homes have batteries. So a major opportunity that we see is retrofitting existing systems with batteries and deploying new batteries with solar. Um, the MO for the last 15 years has been solar first. Um, that is really starting to flip, and we think that a lot of the changes that are anticipated at the federal level are going to continue to drive that. Um, so Duke University released a study earlier this year that found that the largest balancing authorities in the U.S. that account for 95% of load, they could accommodate another 76 to 126 gigawatts of new load if those loads could be curtailed for somewhere between a quarter to 1% of their maximum uptime. So you start adding batteries to residential solar, and you start allowing for some of that peak load reduction and management in ways that wouldn't otherwise be possible. So I think residential DERs in a lot of ways, their impact to the grid is simultaneously too much and not enough, because we haven't really figured out how to design rates and set up ways to manage the assets that leverages their benefits in a broad-based way.
Okay. So can I ask a follow-up question? You talked about retrofitting.
Mm-hmm.
And what would that cost look like? Have you done analysis of how much that would cost? I'm just
All
wondering how if that's really practical for the for that person who wants to go that route.
Yeah, so I think it is, because at least at least in markets where there has been a significant change in net energy metering policies, um, like California with the onset of NEM 3, and with the some of the new grandfathering provisions that are coming into place, where existing NEM 1 and NEM 2 customers are going to be rolling off of those programs. There are the in you know, I haven't seen any specific analysis around this, and we haven't done any ourselves, but there's a lot of reason to believe that customers facing those conditions are going to um, have a lot of motivation to um, get into those new, more favorable compensation structures.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's a good segue into another topic, which is the
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure cost challenge. And as you
Right.
know, our members, regulators expect utilities to maintain and upgrade the infrastructure because, of course, it relates directly to reliability.
Mm-hmm.
And you have expressed that utilities are facing billions of dollars in distribution system upgrades driven by load growth. So let's talk about the drivers of those costs and how the system upgrades translate to consumers. Can you walk us through the typical capital costs utilities are facing to perform these upgrades?
Yeah, and I'm going to have to talk in very general terms here because there's a lot of variability in how utilities treat these costs. But if we look at it from the perspective of a homeowner who is installing one or more DERs and needs to do some kind of um, capacity increase on their end in order to facilitate that. The simplest, most straightforward approach is just um, increasing the capacity of their service line that's coming in from the utility, and those costs for to the customer are somewhere in the $2,000 to $5,000 range. Um, and then that's for an overhead service. For an underground service, it's could be double that because of the trenching. And then again, generally, the first $2,000 to $3,000 of that line capacity increase would be covered by the utility. Um, and then if there is a transformer upgrade or a pole replacement, something like that that's required,
Right.
you know, now we're into the $10,000 plus range. If multiple customers are on a transformer, the utility is going to be more willing to bear that cost. If it's just one customer, it's probably going to be their responsibility. Um, so there is uh, there's a lot of reason to want to try and avoid those expenses. But then on the customer side of the equation, for um, just if they need to replace their panel, and this is all this is all downstream of the utility work, of course, but this is the thing that triggers the need for the distribution system upgrades. Panel capacity increase would cost the customer somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000. They need an electrician to do that work. They need to submit an application to the utility for service modification, and there's all of the there's all of the review and whatnot that's associated with that. So um, there there are a range of options available to avoid these kinds of costs, but they need to be um, available and well understood by the people who are implementing them.
Okay. So you said there's a range of options.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to chat a little bit about what those options are, what they look like?
Sure. So, I mean, the there are a couple different categories of potential technological solutions. There are um, smart panels, which, if the smart panel is part of a service capacity increase, it's not necessarily going to um, alleviate some of those expenses on the utility distribution side. Um, the advantages of smart panels is that they really do provide um, the ultimate granularity in terms of data availability and control for demand response. Um, the downside is that they're pretty expensive, and they're probably overkill for a lot of people in that not every single load needs to be controllable. Um, and then there are devices that are, um, uh, and again, these are, this is behind the meter, in the customer's home, devices that can pause different loads, that are able to coordinate um, whether various different loads are on or off at any given time. These types of pausing and coordinating devices are good for situations where there is sufficient room in the customer service panel to install additional breakers. They're not as favorable when space in the customer's service panel is at a premium. And then, meter socket adapters are, made by ConnectDER and a few other vendors, are a really good option for outdoor loads, where panel space is at a premium. So if you're installing an EV charger, if you're installing solar, any kind of or batteries, any kind of large load that's on the outside of the home, um, the meter socket adapter is a good solution.
Okay. So there are some non-wires alternatives. And what's the role of these non-wires alternatives? Are there any pilot projects that you can point to? And what does it look like actually in practice?
Yeah, so I think in practice, what the three types of technologies that I just described,
Hmm.
the smart panels, the circuit pausing devices, meter socket adapters, are all ways that we can attack this problem, which I liken to um, a road that has some traffic congestion, um, and instead of adding another lane to the road, the first thing we're going to do is try and improve the timing of the traffic signals,
Hmm.
right? So I think that's at a fundamental level what we're trying to do with NWAs is be a lot smarter about where the actual constraint is, and then attack that problem. Um, so we were talking about the cost of increasing panel capacity a couple minutes ago, and I just wanted to use an example from my own home, um, and then validate that with some data. So yesterday was one of the hottest days of the year so far. in eastern Pennsylvania where I live, it was every bit of 100 degrees outside. And earlier this morning, I looked at what our energy usage was yesterday, and the 15-minute peak demand was just a little bit over 10 kilowatts. And our home is fully electrified. That demand peak occurred early afternoon when the air conditioning was running and the electric hot water heater cycled on. So that was 10 kW. Um, a 100 amp residential service can provide 19 kW continuously, and then 24 max. And then a 200 amp service can double that. So you know, I I have a 200 amp service, but even if I didn't, yesterday on what was the hottest day of the year, I was really only using half of my service capacity. Um, so we don't really do service panel upgrades and replacements because we don't have capacity. We do them because we run out of physical space in the electrical panel to add more circuits. And that's a pretty bad reason to spend $5,000. It's not something that a customer really wants to hear, right?
Right.
So just going into the some of the research around this, there was a study that was done by an organization called Home Energy Analytics in 2022 that found that for customers that had a service size of 100 amps up to 200 amps, 80% of them were using no more than 50% of their their panel's capacity or their services capacity. Um, that's pretty telling. Organization in California called Spur put out a report last year called Solving the Panel Puzzle. And they found that um, the vast majority of homes, so even homes with 100 amps services, are using less than 50% of their electrical capacity, which means that there's, um, you know, assuming there is space available in the panel, which is, definitely a constraint,
Hmm.
that most people can electrify their homes without needing to upgrade their service. Both those studies were from California. There's uh, Mass CEC has been doing similar research and has um, found similar results, although they're for larger homes. They think 150 amps might be more appropriate to satisfy winter heating demand. But that's the general sense of what the research has been showing, that um, vast majority of customers have enough ampacity, even with a 100 amp service, to pursue electrification. We just need the right tools and the right management to allow them to stay at that level.
So next, let's look at any gaps that might
Mm-hmm.
exist. So from your perspective, walk us through the gap in visibility from feeder to meter, the planning visibility gap. What are the outcomes of limited or ineffective planning? So what does this mean for customers who are trying to interconnect new DER, such as EV chargers?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there, and again, I'm generalizing to the entire country is a little difficult here, but
Right.
it's, you know, it's fundamentally a pretty reactive process. And customers that do need to pursue um, a service panel replacement and upsizing um, are between the utility timelines, between the um, electrical inspectors and city approvals, and between the availability of electricians to physically show up at their house and do the work, which is a no small barrier that we, we could have an entire other discussion about. Um, that process is going to take the customer somewhere between 6 weeks and 4 months. Um, so when you're trying to get a $500 level 2 EV charger installed in your house, um, and you're looking at that timeline and spending thousands of dollars, it's definitely something that is going to give you pause and be a barrier to adopting new technology. It's a little easier um, for the customer to um, endure that kind of cost and timeline when they're getting solar and batteries, because the overall cost of the project is a lot more. But you know that amount of spending and uncertainty for a $500 EV charger is something that's more difficult to overcome.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So, how would you counsel someone who's thinking about getting an electric vehicle? What would you tell them? Like, if you had a friend who was going to get an electric vehicle, and they say, "Oh yeah, and I'm just going to install an EV charger." How would you tell them to proceed? Would you say, "Hey, you need to start this process really early as you're shopping for your electric vehicle, so that maybe the wait won't seem as long"? How should someone proceed given those circumstances?
Yeah, there's definitely a gap in the consumer education here, of everything that might need to occur once that you bring that new car home.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think that doing as much research as you can at the outset is appropriate. I think we have found that um, customers. I mean, we hear all the time about range anxiety, right? That's a huge thing with EVs. Am I going to be able to get to where I need to go? And
Right.
I think that is so is so prevalent in customers' minds. They understand how paramount charging is. Um, they do a lot of research, um, and we probably get, in terms of customers coming to ConnectDER and asking product questions. I bet we get 20 homeowner inquiries about our EV charging product for every homeowner who contacts us about the solar product, or our Islander. It just there it is so at the forefront of their minds, and it's something that people do actively research and seek out solutions for. Um, and there's a lot of self-education that goes on there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, in terms of potential technological solutions, we're increasingly hearing about solutions that can help mitigate the need for distribution system upgrades from smart panels to MSAs. But how do these technologies work, and why would utilities or consumers choose one over the other?
And I wish I wish I could, you know, have some visuals here. But really the choice in my mind comes down to, um, do you have space or not in your existing electrical panel to, um, install additional circuit breakers? And if you don't, um, then your choices are, um, either replace the panel, in which case you might want to consider, a smart panel, which could provide some level of future proofing, and will give more control, for future load management scenarios. Um, and the other option, of course, if you don't have space, is using a meter socket adapter, that allows you for any major load that's going to be on the outside of your home, like uh, an EV charger, battery, solar, even a heat pump, um, that allows you to avoid that space constraint in the service panel. Um, if you do have room in your service panel, and you just want to make sure that, loads are being controlled and being managed, there are, um, circuit pausing and circuit coordinating devices that you can buy, which get installed, in line between the circuit breaker and the load, that have effectively a relay inside of them that can open or close, depending on um, how much your panel is drawing, and whether certain things need to be paused to stay under the rating of the service. So any one of those solutions can be appropriate, given on depending on the situation that an individual finds themselves in.
Hmm. So, in terms of overall safety,
Mm-hmm.
our members are, of course, concerned with safety. So,
Absolutely.
right. So when utilities are evaluating load controlling technologies, they're focused on both the customer and the contractor experience. So who owns the assets in place, and most importantly, safety. So
Mm-hmm.
how are companies such as yours just making sure, ensuring the safety of the grid?
Yeah. So that's. I mean, there are many different aspects to that, right? Like, up to and including, potential cybersecurity concerns, that we've heard a little bit about in the news recently. But just on a fundamental level, you know, ConnectDER is, we participate in a lot of the committees that develop standards, both UL, and ANSI. We're involved in NEMA, the Electrical Manufacturers Association, um, and we do a lot to kind of shape those standards, with the utility perspective and customer experience perspective in mind. We we sit at the nexus, for better or worse, of the customer, the utility, very mindful of course of regulatory imperatives. So we're in that space of constantly balancing all those things. But the way the safety testing really works is, there are UL standards for safety, which are validated by any number of um, and NERDLs, nationally recognized testing laboratories.
Mhm.
Um, they validate that the products are adhering to the standards. Um, we tend to build a lot of redundancy into our devices, um, so that, um, if the electronics were to fail, there is still a hardware backup with circuit breakers. Um, we 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 have that, that level of fail safe just built into the product. And that really is the last thing, that if something is going to fail, we design it so that it fails in a safe condition, which is another thing that UL evaluates, right? Like, um, if there were, a grid event that caused a surge, during a storm, or what have you, um, when the troubleman shows up on site to restore power, are they going to find that product in a safe condition? And the answer is yes, because of all the testing and validation that we do.
Okay, let's talk about regulatory support surrounding
Mm-hmm.
this. And you've given a lot of information to address the challenges and likely solutions. And we
Mm-hmm.
know that we see change and momentum occurring in the states first. That's where it happens, in the states. So,
Right.
what are the states leading on customer driven solutions as alternatives to utility infrastructure upgrades? And to that end, what can NARUC members, our public utility commissions, do to accelerate the deployment of these kinds of customer owned technologies?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I think, in my mind, there are really two parts to this. There's like the scaffolding that gets created to establish the market, and then there are the smaller and more tactical bits that reduce barriers and enable customers to more cost effectively adopt technology. So there's the top down, and then there's the bottom up. And I think the place where these two things have come together the best is in Maryland. So from the scaffolding perspective, the legislature established something called the DRIVE Act, the Distributed Renewable Integration and Vehicle Electrification DRIVE Act, and that did really three things. Um, it required utilities to develop vehicle to grid charging plans, um, virtual power plant plans, both of which um, have been released, at least in draft form, earlier this year. And then it also established September 2028 as the date for Maryland utilities to implement time of use rates, which are, a huge boon for solving that problem that we were talking about at the very beginning of the conversation, where um, solar and storage, really need to be paired together to be most effective at reducing peak demand. So then concurrently with the Drive Act, the PSC was also adopting rules around meter socket adapters. They made changes to uh, the the Maryland Code of Regulation to um, codify some criteria for MSAs for utilities to um, update their standards to allow for devices to be installed between the meter and the socket, and then also establish a process and timelines for testing and then publishing approvals. So we've been working with the utilities in Maryland for the last 6 months or so on that, and they're going to be available for use on a statewide basis by early August. The Drive Act created the financial incentives to provide grid services. PSC did the rules for MSAs that significantly reduce the cost of installing the equipment, and no other state has really tied those two things together quite so crisply. Um, you know, it's been a very it's just been, I don't think, entirely intentional and coordinated, but it's worked out that way, and it's really set the stage. So I think in general, my ask of regulators is that they work actively with utilities to establish standardized processes for new technology evaluation. Not just meter socket adapters. There are lots of um, grid edge customer owned devices that are um, going to be interactive with the utility distribution system that utilities are going to need to understand and to be able to integrate into their planning and into their thinking. And I think we need a broader process um, for having that evaluation and that conversation between utilities and industry. And I think that's something that regulators could really help to enable.
Are there any other states you think that might be up and coming soon?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're we're working on laying out that process that I described. That utility updates standards to allow for devices to be installed, and then also sets up a process for testing.
Mhm.
We're working on that in um, 5 or 6 other states. I think you know New York is a great example of where I think it's going to be successful because of the combination of that top down bottom up approach. Massachusetts, we've already implemented um, the the processes in New Jersey and in Illinois, um, in California, Arizona, Colorado. So it's becoming a pretty widespread approach. The There are about a third of U.S. households at this point that, if they chose to, that customer would be able to have a meter socket adapter installed in their home in order to facilitate solar energy storage, electric vehicle installations, and that will probably be um, closer to half of the country by this time next year.
Wow.
So we're making a lot of progress,
Mhm.
but I do think there are still opportunities to um, particularly as technology continues to evolve, just to set up, you know, more structure around the evaluation of lots of different types of technologies.
So that was my last question,
Mm-hmm.
but are there any other um, topics, anything that we didn't touch on that you think is important for folks to know?
The only other thing that I would say is that the residential distributed energy industry, um, while um, while we've made incredible strides, um, are also facing some pretty unprecedented challenges due to changes at the federal level, that we don't we don't yet have a full understanding of the impact of. Um, and we're my my perception of what we need to do is, um, we're going to need to innovate faster than we ever have before. We're going to need to reduce cost more than we ever have before. And most of the places where um, there's slack in the system to reduce cost is
Hmm.
around interconnection and balance of system costs and all of the soft costs associated with permitting and so forth. So the inverter prices, the module prices, you know EV charger, all those things have had about as much cost driven out of them as they possibly can. Where we're really going to need to innovate is on streamlining the deployment. So I think, um, yeah, again, we don't fully understand what the impacts of federal changes are going to be, but that's what we're preparing for, is um, driving down those soft costs. So there's that again speaks to the need for just improving processes and getting things deployable faster.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this was a great conversation, Jonathan. You shared a lot of wonderful information for our listeners, and um, yeah, hope to see you again soon at a NARUC meeting, maybe at our next Shark Tank activity. And yeah,
Yeah, I'll be there in the audience, just quietly rooting for everyone. It's yeah.
well, the Shark Tank was very popular, and hopefully we will be doing it again at a meeting soon. Not this summer, but maybe in a future meeting. Since it was so popular, we can do it again, and we'll rely on veterans like you to help educate those would-be Shark Tank contestants.
Yep, I'm happy to provide a little bit of coaching to anybody who would like it.
Great. And again, this is Regina Davis, and thank you all for taking a power walk with us today.
All right, thank you very much.